Good morning, sixth graders. Today is Monday, November 9th. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion about the third monotheistic religion that we're learning about, Islam. Remember that we started talking about monotheistic religions with Judaism, and then we went on to Christianity, and then we went on to Islam. Remember that all three of these religions are monotheistic, meaning they believe in one God. So to begin today, you're going to finish filling in this graphic organizer on your page. You already have the religion filled in, Islam, and Mr. Mario went ahead and filled in the first answer for the founder, whose name was Muhammad. Your job now is to fill in the holy book, holy places, number of gods, and the name of the believers on your own. Pause the video to do this now. Today's topic is the 5 pillars of Islam, and the 5 pillars of Islam are the 5 major beliefs of the religion of Islam. First, there's faith, then there's prayer, then there's charity, then there's fasting, and lastly, pilgrimage. You're going to be responsible for one pillar to present to the class. But first, let's start with a couple notes. The 5 pillars of Islam are the 5 main beliefs that every Muslim is expected to perform according to the Quran. And I'm going to take a second to edit this PowerPoint because the Quran is spelled 2 different ways and you might see it either way. So what we're going to do first is take a look at an example of how I want you to annotate the pillar that you're assigned to and answer the questions. So we have this passage here about the first pillar. The first pillar I can see translates to faith because it's in the title. So what I'm going to do is read this, and as I read it, I'm going to circle key words and any vocabulary words in the passage. What you're also going to do is underline important evidence that tells you specifically where you see what the pillar is all about. And lastly, you're going to put a star next to any important or interesting or exciting information. So let's take a look at how that looks for the first pillar. The first pillar of faith is Shahada, the declaration of faith. I circled faith because Shahada means faith, and so that's an important word, so I went ahead and circled it for an annotation. To show belief in God and Muhammad's prophethood, a Muslim says, "There is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God." So as you can see, I circled God, Muhammad, Muslim, because Muhammad and Muslim are vocabulary words that we learn in class, and God seems to be an important word in this passage, so I circled that as well. The first part of the Shahada is stating their belief in monotheism. There is no God but God. Like Christians and Jews, Muslims believe that one all-powerful God, whom they call Allah, created the universe. They believe this God spoke to humans through a number of prophets. These prophets include Moses and Jesus, who are also a part of Jewish and Christian beliefs. The Quran also includes these prophets. The second part of the Shahada says that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Muslims believe that God spoke to Muhammad and sent the message of Islam through him. The Shahada is a part of Muslims' everyday life, not just prayers. Parents whisper it into their babies' ears. Muslims try to say the Shahada as their last words before death. Students who are about to take a difficult exam say the Shahada to help them while they are focusing. Muslims also believe that all souls will face the day of judgment. After they die, God will consider all their actions. Those who have lived according to God's rules will be rewarded and allowed to enter heaven. Those who have done evil or not believed in God will be punished by falling into hell. So that's what it looks like when you circle vocabulary and key words in the passage. The next thing I did is I underlined evidence that tells me directly about what the Shahada is, what this first pillar is. I chose to underline the first sentence because it tells me what it means in English. The first pillar of faith is Shahada, the declaration of faith. So I underlined that. I also underlined this sentence. The first part of the Shahada is stating their belief in monotheism. There is no God but God. That seemed to be a very important piece of evidence that supports that the first pillar is about faith. Lastly, those who have lived according to God's rules will be rewarded and allowed to enter heaven. I underlined that because I also found it to be an important part of the first pillar. Lastly, I put stars next to information that I just found interesting. I found it interesting that students who are about to take a difficult exam say the Shahada to help them while they are focusing. So I put a star there. I also put a star next to Muslims also believe that all souls will face a day of judgment. After that, I went on to answer the questions. The first one is a fill in the blank saying, my pillar is best described in English as, and I went on to explain what it means in English. It means the declaration of faith in God. The next part says, according to this pillar, Muslims believe that if you say your faith in God, then you will be rewarded by going to heaven. And lastly, what I did was I underlined all the things that I underlined as evidence in my passage, I copied it down here in quotes. What you're going to do next is take a look at the fifth pillar, which is about pilgrimage. What I want you to do is read this passage and do exactly like I did by circling keywords and vocabulary, underlining evidence that tells you about pilgrimage in the passage, and putting a star next to anything that you found interesting. Go ahead and begin on this now, making sure that you fill in these questions after.